My sister dragged me outside and humiliated me at her own engagement party. I'm Mara Whitfield, and that night in Charleston is burned into my memory. The whole event was meant to be perfect, at least for Celeste. The venue looked like something you'd see in a magazine. Tall windows, golden lights spilling across polished floors, and tables stacked with champagne glasses that never seemed to run dry. Everywhere I turned, people were laughing, dressed in their finest clothes, all gathered to celebrate her big moment. I arrived trying to calm my nerves, reminding myself why I was there. Whatever distance existed between us, I still wanted to show support. I told myself I could get through a few hours, even if being around her always made me feel like I was shrinking in her shadow. She was standing in the center of it all, glowing in her white dress, smiling like she owned the world. Everyone's eyes followed her, and I could almost feel the heat of their admiration. I tried to blend in, keeping to the side, but it didn't matter. Celeste noticed me. At first it seemed harmless, she waved, flashing that perfect smile. But when she lifted her glass and called for everyone's attention, I felt my stomach twist. She mentioned my name, her voice sweet but sharp at the edges, and suddenly every head in the room turned toward me. My hands went cold, and I wanted to disappear. She asked me to come forward, and I didn't know what else to do but walk up, all those eyes burning into me. Celeste draped an arm around my shoulders, her perfume heavy in the air, and I could hear the murmur of people expecting something heartfelt, maybe a sisterly toast. But instead, her words cut like glass. She joked about me being awkward, about me never fitting in, little barbs disguised as humor that made the crowd laugh at my expense. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile, frozen in place. Before I could step away, she grabbed my arm. Her grip was firm, nails pressing into my skin as she pulled me toward the exit. The crowd parted, whispers following us like a shadow. Outside, the warm Charleston air felt suffocating. She didn't stop talking, her voice low, but laced with venom. She reminded me of my place, how I'd always be second, how I didn't matter in her world of shining lights and admirers. I couldn't move, couldn't answer. The laughter and music from inside poured faintly through the doors while my sister's words echoed louder than anything else. For a moment, it felt like the whole world was leaning in to watch me break. And when she finally let go, I stood in silence, staring at her, while the whispers of the crowd filled the night around us. Growing up, I always knew where I stood in my family. Celeste was the star, the one my parents adored, while I was the one who stayed in the background. Our parents, Howard and Darlene, could never hide their pride when it came to her. They praised her beauty, her charm, the way she could walk into a room and have everyone smiling. When it came to me, I was the smart one, but that label felt more like a consolation prize than real affection. I remember helping Celeste with her schoolwork. She struggled in classes, but I would spend hours tutoring her, writing out notes, even preparing projects. When the grades came back decent, she would beam at our parents, and they would cheer for her success. No one noticed the work I had put in. She never once admitted I had been the one guiding her. Instead, she basked in the praise, and I stood off to the side, invisible. That was how it always went. Birthdays, holidays, family gatherings, Celeste took up all the space. She'd perform little skits at Christmas, sing songs, or show off her new clothes. The family clapped and laughed. When I tried to join in, it was like my voice didn't reach them. Over time, I stopped trying. I let her have the spotlight because it seemed like that's what everyone wanted. When we grew older, nothing really changed. Celeste chased attention wherever she went, and she got it without even trying. I chose a quieter life, building a routine that gave me peace. I didn't need crowds or applause. I told myself I was fine with it, that I didn't need what she had. But sometimes, late at night, I wondered what it would feel like to be seen the way she was seen. Then came the engagement news. I didn't hear it directly from her at first. I saw a picture on social media, her hand with a sparkling ring, her smile wide as ever. It stung to realize the world found out before I did. Days later, she sent me a short message about the party, like she was checking a box rather than truly wanting me there. When I asked about it, she brushed it off, saying of course I was invited. She couldn't leave me out, it wouldn't look right. That one sentence said everything. To her, I wasn't a sister to be celebrated with, just an obligation. And as much as it hurt, I wasn't even surprised. It was simply the role I had always played in her story, the shadow standing behind the golden child. The engagement party was held at a historic estate in Charleston, the kind of place you only ever see in glossy magazines. The house was massive, with tall white columns, wide porches, and gardens that stretched out in every direction. Inside, the ceilings seemed endless, and chandeliers spilled warm light across polished wooden floors. Guests floated through the rooms in suits and gowns, their voices a steady hum of laughter and polite conversation. Celeste's fiancé, Grant Alderman, fit perfectly into that world. He was polished and confident, the kind of man who shook hands firmly and remembered everyone's name. His family was wealthy, and you could tell by the way the guests carried themselves that this wasn't just a party, it was a show of status. Everyone seemed comfortable in the setting, everyone except me. I stood near the edges, holding a glass I barely sipped from, trying not to look as out of place as I felt. My dress was simple compared to the shimmering outfits around me, and I caught myself adjusting it too often, wishing I could disappear into the walls. But I reminded myself that I was there for one reason: to support my sister. Celeste glided through the crowd with ease, her smile sharp and practiced. Whenever she passed me, she made sure to say something that sounded sweet but stung underneath. She'd lean close to a guest and say, "Mara's always been shy, bless her heart," loud enough for me to hear. Or she'd laugh lightly and add, "She's not really used to parties like these." Each time, the people around us chuckled, treating it like a harmless joke. I forced a smile, but inside I shrank a little more. The worst part was that no one seemed to notice how uncomfortable it made me. My parents laughed along, as if they were used to brushing off those little digs. Other relatives nodded and changed the subject, as though what she said wasn't worth challenging. It was easier for everyone to let her have the last word. Still, there was one person who seemed to pay attention. I caught Grant watching me more than once. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but his eyes followed when Celeste made her comments. He didn't laugh. He didn't join in. He simply observed, quiet and thoughtful, his expression unreadable. It was the first time that night I felt seen, though I didn't know what to make of it. I kept my distance, unsure if I should approach him or avoid him entirely. The whole evening felt like a performance, and I was the awkward extra in the background of Celeste's show. Still, a small part of me wondered if maybe, just maybe, Grant was beginning to notice the cracks beneath her perfect image. The music softened and glasses clinked as Celeste called for attention. She stood tall in the center of the ballroom, her dress glowing under the lights, her hand lifted in a graceful gesture. Everyone fell silent, waiting for her to speak. Her voice was smooth and warm at first, thanking guests for being there, praising her fiancé, making everyone smile. Then her eyes landed on me. She waved me forward, her tone sweet, as if she was about to honor me. My stomach nodded, but I stepped closer, forcing my legs to move. People cheered politely, expecting some heartfelt sisterly moment. Celeste draped her arm around my shoulders, pulling me in, her smile wide for the crowd. For a second, I thought maybe she was actually going to be kind. But then her words shifted. She told a story, laughing lightly as though it were harmless. She said I had always been jealous of her, that I had trouble fitting in, that I was too awkward for parties like this. The room chuckled. My face burned, but she kept going. She added another jab, saying I could never seem to keep a man around, her tone playful but cutting. Laughter rose again, filling the air, each sound digging deeper into me. I stood frozen, every muscle stiff, trying to hold my expression steady while inside I felt like I was crumbling. People weren't cruel on purpose, they just followed her lead. If she laughed, they laughed. And in that moment, I was the joke. When the laughter started to fade, she tightened her grip on my arm. "Come on, let's cool off," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Before I could respond, she pulled me toward the doors. My heels scraped against the polished floor as she dragged me out of the ballroom. A few guests followed with their eyes, whispering as the doors swung shut behind us. In the hallway, her voice dropped, but the venom was sharper. She didn't stop. She hissed that I embarrassed her, that I didn't belong in her world. Her nails dug into my arm as she leaned closer. "Don't you dare think you'll ever matter here," she spat. "You'll always be second to me." Her words hit harder than the laughter. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I didn't argue, didn't fight back. I just looked at her, my chest aching with silence. Then I pulled away and walked off, my footsteps echoing against the walls. I knew one thing for certain. I would never forget that moment, no matter how much time passed. The night air outside the estate was heavy and warm, carrying the faint sound of music from the ballroom. I tried to steady my breathing after what had just happened, keeping to the side of the garden so no one would notice me. My mind replayed my sister's words again and again, each one cutting deeper. I wanted to escape, to disappear into the shadows of the tall hedges. That was when I heard voices nearby. I froze, half hidden behind a row of trimmed bushes. 2 men stepped out from the patio, their suits catching the soft glow of the garden lights. One of them was Grant. The other I recognized as one of his groomsmen, someone who had been by his side most of the evening. They didn't notice me. At first, I thought I should leave, but their tone caught my attention. Grant's voice was low, strained, nothing like the charming, confident man who had greeted guests all night. He was frustrated. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," he said. "Every time I turn around, she's whispering to someone else, batting her eyes, acting like I'm not even there." The groomsman muttered something about stress before the wedding, but Grant shook his head. "It's not just that. I caught her lying to me last week. Said she was meeting a friend, but I know she wasn't. I can't prove it, but I'm not blind. I think she's cheating. And the worst part is, she doesn't even seem to care if I notice." My heart pounded as his words sank in. For a moment, I forgot the sting of my own humiliation. I pressed my back against the hedge, careful not to move, afraid they would see me listening. Grant continued, his voice heavy. "I keep telling myself maybe she'll change, maybe she'll settle down once we're married. But what if she doesn't? What if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life?" The groomsman tried to reassure him, telling him to focus on the good things, to remember how much everyone admired the 2 of them together. But Grant didn't answer right away. He just let out a long breath, like he was carrying a weight he couldn't put down. I stood there, stunned. It was the first time I'd seen behind the perfect picture Celeste always painted. She wasn't untouchable, not even in his eyes. He saw the lies, the flirting, the cracks in her mask. He knew she wasn't who she pretended to be. For the first time that night, something shifted inside me. I wasn't sure what to call it: hope, relief, maybe even power. Celeste had dragged me into the open and crushed me without hesitation. But now I held something she couldn't control. A secret. A truth that could change everything. I didn't know yet what I would do with it. But I knew one thing. I wasn't as powerless as she thought. The morning after the engagement party, I woke up with a heavy weight in my chest. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives about how beautiful the night had been, as if nothing had gone wrong. Not one person mentioned what Celeste had done to me in front of everyone. It was like my humiliation didn't exist. I stayed quiet in the family group chat, but Celeste didn't. She sent out photos of herself in her glowing dress, making little jokes that felt aimed at me even though she never used my name. "Some people just don't know how to enjoy themselves," she wrote once. Everyone laughed along, adding comments and heart emojis, brushing right over it. When my parents called, I thought maybe they would comfort me, but instead they told me to let it go. My dad said, "Your sister has a lot on her plate. Don't take it so seriously." My mom chimed in, "This is her time to shine. Just be happy for her." I bit my tongue, swallowing the anger that burned in me. It didn't matter what Celeste did. They always found a way to excuse it. For a while, I avoided her completely. I stopped answering her texts, and when she tried to bait me with little comments online, I ignored them. I focused on work, on keeping busy, anything to keep her voice out of my head. But then something happened I didn't expect. One evening, I got a message from Grant. At first, I thought it was a mistake. It was short, just asking if we could talk. I hesitated before replying, but curiosity won. We spoke over the phone, and his voice was careful, almost unsure. He apologized for how Celeste treated me at the party. He said he had noticed, and that it wasn't right. For the first time, someone acknowledged what I went through that night. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to brush it off, to protect myself, but another part felt a strange relief. We talked a little longer, and his words grew heavier. He admitted he was nervous about marrying Celeste. He didn't go into details, but I could hear the doubt in his tone. He sounded tired, like a man carrying secrets too big for him to keep alone. That call left me conflicted. A small bond had formed between us, fragile but real. I wasn't used to anyone questioning Celeste, let alone someone so close to her. Yet I also knew how dangerous it was to be pulled into their relationship. Lying awake that night, I couldn't stop replaying our conversation. I wrestled with myself, torn between staying loyal to family and doing what felt right. If I spoke up, I risked tearing everything apart. If I stayed quiet, I'd be part of a lie. And deep down, I knew this choice wasn't going to stay in my hands forever. It happened by accident at first. I wasn't looking for anything, but the truth found its way to me. A few weeks after the party, I went out for coffee with a mutual acquaintance, someone who had known both me and Celeste since school. We hadn't spoken in years, but when Celeste's name came up, the look on her face told me something wasn't right. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You know she's still seeing Drake, right?" The name hit me like a slap. Drake Kessler, Celeste's old flame. They had been on and off for years before Grant came into the picture. I almost laughed it off, thinking it was a rumor, but the acquaintance looked serious. She explained that she had seen them together more than once, slipping into quiet places where they thought no one would notice. At first, I told myself it was impossible. But as the days passed, I couldn't ignore the little things I started noticing. Celeste would disappear during family dinners, claiming she had a work call. Her social media posts didn't always line up with where she claimed to be. And then, the final blow came when the same acquaintance told me she had overheard Celeste bragging to a friend. She said straight out she's marrying Grant for his family's money, the woman told me. She said she'll always have her fun on the side. Her words, not mine. My hands went cold. As much as I had doubted my sister over the years, hearing this confirmed what I had feared all along. She wasn't just careless. She was planning an entire future built on lies. I went home that night and sat in my room for hours, staring at the wall. The evidence was clear enough in my mind, but what was I supposed to do with it? If I stayed silent, I would be letting Grant walk into a marriage that was rotten at the core. He didn't deserve that. But if I spoke up, I would be the one to light the match that burned my family to the ground. I could already hear my parents' voices if I told them, "You're jealous. You're trying to ruin this for her." They would defend Celeste no matter what. And Celeste herself? She would come at me with everything she had. She'd twist the story, make me look like a bitter sister inventing lies. Still, my heart wouldn't let me rest. I kept thinking about the way Grant had spoken to me, the quiet doubt in his voice, the way he seemed so weighed down. He deserved the truth, even if it shattered him. But every time I thought of picking up the phone, my hand froze. I had lived my whole life in my sister's shadow, punished whenever I dared to step out. And now, here I was, holding the one thing that could destroy her. The choice was mine, and it terrified me. I couldn't keep the secret inside any longer. The weight of it pressed on me every day, making it hard to focus on anything else. After days of hesitation, I finally decided to reach out to Grant. My message was short, asking if we could meet in private. I didn't explain why, but he agreed almost immediately, suggesting a quiet cafe on the edge of town. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting with his jacket neatly folded over the chair beside him. He looked tired, his eyes dim despite his polished appearance. I sat down, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear my own words. For a moment, I thought about backing out, but then I remembered what I had learned. He deserved to know. I took a deep breath and began. I told him everything I had discovered, how Celeste was still seeing Drake, how people had seen them together, how she had openly bragged about marrying him only for his family's money. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. I laid it all out in front of him, afraid he would get angry, afraid he would accuse me of lying. When I finally fell silent, I couldn't bring myself to look up. The air between us was heavy, filled with the sound of clinking cups and low conversations from the other tables. I braced myself for the worst. But Grant didn't explode. He didn't accuse me. Instead, his voice was calm, almost too calm. "I knew something wasn't right," he said slowly. "I've been feeling it for months." I looked at him then, surprised by the steadiness in his eyes. He wasn't shocked the way I expected. He wasn't even defensive. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead as though my words had confirmed the doubts that had been gnawing at him all along. "Thank you for telling me," he added after a moment. His tone was genuine, heavy with sincerity. I know that couldn't have been easy. The relief in his voice unsettled me. I had expected anger, denial, maybe even blame, but instead he looked almost lighter, like a man who had finally been given permission to admit the truth he already knew. I shifted in my seat, unsure what to say next. "I didn't want to hurt you," I murmured. "You didn't," he replied firmly. "You've done the opposite." We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing. Then carefully, he suggested we keep this between us for now. He wasn't ready to act immediately, but he wanted time to think, to plan. I agreed, even though part of me feared what would happen next. As I left the cafe, my nerves still buzzing, one thought stayed with me. I had finally stepped out of my sister's shadow, and for the first time, I wasn't the one being silenced. Weeks passed before the truth finally came out. Celeste organized a family dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown, meant to show off her perfect life once again. Everyone was there, our parents, relatives, and of course, Grant sitting beside her. The atmosphere was cheerful at first, full of small talk and clinking glasses, but I could see something different in Grant's face. He wasn't smiling the way he usually did. His eyes were steady, serious, like he had already made a decision. When the main course was served, Grant set his fork down and cleared his throat. The table went quiet as everyone looked at him. His voice was calm but firm. "I need to say something," he began. Celeste turned toward him with her polished smile, clearly expecting some loving toast. Instead, his next words silenced the whole room. "I can't go through with this engagement," he said. "There are trust issues between us that can't be fixed." The words hung in the air like a storm. Celeste froze, her face twisting as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. The relatives exchanged shocked looks. My parents leaned forward, confused. Celeste quickly recovered and turned her glare straight at me. "This is your doing," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You've been poisoning him against me because you're jealous." My cheeks burned as every pair of eyes swung to me. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, my parents jumped in. My mom shook her head, looking disappointed. "Mara, how could you? Your sister has worked so hard for this future." My dad added, "You've always had this jealousy, and now you've ruined everything." The weight of their accusations crushed me. I wanted to sink into my chair and vanish. But then Grant spoke again, his tone steady. "No," he said clearly. "Mara hasn't ruined anything. If anything, she's been honest with me when no one else was. The truth is, I've had doubts for a long time. This decision is mine." His words shifted the air at the table. Celeste's face turned red with fury, her hands clenching around her napkin. She shot up from her chair, knocking over her glass, the red wine spilling across the white tablecloth. "You'll regret this," she hissed, glaring at both of us. Then she stormed out of the restaurant, heels clicking against the floor, her exit dramatic enough to make every diner turn and stare. The table sat in stunned silence. My parents looked torn between chasing after her and sitting in disbelief. I stayed quiet, my heart racing. For once, I wasn't the one humiliated in front of everyone. Celeste was. The same way she had dragged me outside and crushed me weeks earlier, she was now the one who walked away under the weight of whispers. And in that moment, I knew the balance had finally shifted. Months passed, and the storm my sister had created finally caught up with her. At first, Celeste tried to act like nothing had changed. She posted pictures online, smiling wide, pretending her life was still perfect. But little by little, the cracks showed. People began whispering about her behind her back. Stories of her cheating slipped into conversations, and her once flawless image started to crumble. The same social circles that had adored her at parties now turned cold. Invitations stopped coming. Friends who once laughed at her jokes avoided her, unwilling to be linked to her reputation. The woman who thrived on attention suddenly found herself without an audience. I didn't take pleasure in watching it happen, but I couldn't deny the quiet sense of justice I felt. Celeste had built her world on lies, and now those lies were the very thing tearing it apart. No one had to expose her directly, she exposed herself. Meanwhile, I was still carrying the scars of what she had done to me, but they didn't ache in the same way anymore. I realized I didn't need to get even. Her downfall wasn't my victory. It was the natural result of her choices. That gave me closure. For the first time in years, I wasn't stuck in her shadow. I could finally breathe without waiting for her to cut me down. Grant moved on quietly. I saw him once in town, looking healthier, lighter, like he'd shed a heavy weight. When we spoke, he thanked me again, his voice steady and kind. He made it clear he wasn't bitter, just relieved to be free of something that would have destroyed him in the long run. Our connection never crossed the line into anything more. It stayed respectful, two people bound by an ugly truth, but moving forward in separate directions. Sometimes I thought about what could have happened if I had stayed silent. Grant might have married her, only to discover the truth later. My parents would still see her as flawless, and I would still be the quiet sister no one listened to. But by standing in the truth, even when it terrified me, everything shifted. I hadn't planned revenge. I hadn't plotted her downfall. All I did was refuse to carry her secret. In the end, Celeste destroyed herself. And as for me, I found something I didn't know I had been missing all along, my own voice. For the first time, I wasn't overlooked. I was simply me, and that was enough.